Hi, my name is Erica Young. I'm the Chief Design Officer from One Earth Designs. We are a social enterprise here based in Hong Kong. We develop solar thermal technologies. The first product that we've developed is this solar concentrator that you see here. We started doing our work out in Shanghai. So the two founders went out there. They were trying to solve some very, very big environmental issues, mostly around indoor air pollution and also fuel scarcity, as well as female troubles around having to spend time collecting fuel and collecting wood and things of that nature. So the work started out there. It looks quite a bit like this. Has anybody been out to Shanghai province? As I mentioned, in those tents, the indoor air pollution is horrible. So Kathleen Powers, the founder who just completed her PhD at Harvard in public health, actually tested this air and found out it was 10 times worse than the air in Beijing. You can imagine that. I mean, basically, you go into these tents, and after 15 minutes, your eyes are watering, and you can't even stand to be in there anymore. And so this is what these people were living with day in and day out. And it's one of the leading causes of death in children under 5 in the world. It's also responsible for all sorts of cognitive disabilities, as well as obviously lung problems, etc. So it's a huge issue. Wood out there is protected or often scarce. And dung, which is poo from animals, takes a lot of time to collect, and it also smolders. So it's a really not a great use of energy and creates a lot of the pollution that they are experiencing. And coal is extremely expensive, or unavailable in many places. And so these are pretty much the options that they have to work with. But sun, of course, is abundant and free. And out there, they actually get more than 300 sunny days a year. And there are actually a lot of places in the world just like that. So for them, solar is really a viable option. But of course, with the windstorms and the kind of extreme conditions, using the typical solar panels or electronics that you guys might be familiar with is not really a great option for them, and it's not as robust or as durable as what they need. They had solar cookers that were distributed out there previously, but they really didn't meet the needs of their users. So they were really heavy, they would break easily, you couldn't get them to some of the remote areas, and you couldn't service them once they did break. And so after many, many, many iterations, we came up with a design called Soul Source, and this is the first prototype, or the first sample that you see here. So we did a distribution out in Western China with some partners that was very successful. This is actually us testing on our roof in Kowloon Bay before we moved into the incubation program at Hong Kong Science Park. And this is the founder, Scott, who actually is supposed to be sitting here today, but he's actually selling out in the US. But this is actually in Nepal, so they're cooking lentils on the product out there. So we obviously optimized this product for the developing world, but we found out that it actually is valuable to everyone. So, and I'll explain as you see what happens next. So since then, since launching in Shanghai, we got a lot of international press. We awarded a Prix de Public at the Inventions Geneva, and got a lot of press internationally. So this is actually a billboard in Times Square, and that is a magazine in Australia. So a lot of recognition for the work. And as a result of that, we had a lot of people asking us, well, why can't I buy one? I'm sitting here in Southern California, in Malibu, and I wish I had one for my backyard. And so we didn't actually have a model by which we could sell to that person. And so we decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign that was over 330% funded. So this really validated the fact that this product can be useful in the developing world, but is also valuable and can have an impact in the developed world as well. So just to give you a sense of kind of the parallels here, this is what our pilot distribution looked like. People were carrying the boxes on the back of a motorcycle and taking them away. And this is what our Kickstarter distribution looked like. So this is actually a guy who picked up his product at Burning Man out in Nevada and carried it away so he could use it for the rest of that week. So.
My name is Christina. I was a global fellow with Acumen, and just to get a sense, who have heard of Acumen before? Okay, just a handful. So Acumen is a nonprofit based in the US, and they are one of the first impact investors. So they started impact investment about 13, 14 years ago, starting out from New York. And then they have investment around the world, but mostly in emerging countries. So they have a branch office in West Africa, East Africa, Pakistan, India. They have recently launched in Latin America as well. And so what do Acumen do? Acumen is a nonprofit that uses capital as a means to solve social problems. So I was with Acumen over the past year as a global fellow. Water Health International is one of Acumen investment. It's a company that uses mini purification plants to solve the problem of inaccessibility of clean and affordable water. Water Health International started about 6 years ago, and they now have about 500 plants around the world, most of them in India, and they have recently expanded to Ghana, Nigeria, and Liberia. I was in Ghana in the past year working with this investment of Acumen. And after completing the fellowship, I'm now back in Hong Kong, launching an energy efficiency startup called Blue Sky. And what we try to do is to make energy management interesting and engaging. So from changing words like kilowatt hour, that no one knows what it's about, to something that we can really grasp. And so it's in the startup phase. If you're interested to find out more, you can come talk to me.
Thank you. Can the panelists find their seats? Thank you for your presentations. I guess the first question I was thinking to ask is, a lot of people are talking about double bottom line or triple bottom line, but the question that always bothers me, do you think the financial returns and social returns are sort of at the cost of each other? How do you, like in your social entrepreneurship experience, balance between the two?
I think historically business is used as an efficient way of allocating resource. So why are we asking this question is interesting. I think the nature of business has changed so much that it becomes something that we cannot recognize anymore. Instead of being a service to humanity, sometimes it becomes a monster. So how do we go back to the paper? Anyone who builds a business should create positive value to the society. And financial is a reward of the positive externality or the positive value that you create for the society. So I believe that especially for the next generation, there's simply just no room for, and it's a very aggressive statement, there's simply no room for companies who don't look at the social impact, but simply the financial impact.
And as an impact investor, do you have?
I think I would answer a little bit differently. If you are talking about an early stage startup and we are investing equity in it, it is obviously very, very high risk. On a risk-adjusted basis, it's probably no different than any other startup that you are investing in. But since these startups also have to strive to have a social and environmental impact, it makes their job actually more difficult. Is it necessarily at the expense of financial return? I would say not necessarily at this stage, because frankly, the financial returns don't come until many years later. It has to really get past the first 2 to 3 years. Otherwise, it's a question of, if you're losing money, you're losing money, right? But on the other hand, if you look at debt as opposed to equity, it is actually a more interesting discussion, because if you look at, for instance, microfinance has just been around the longest time. On a risk-adjusted basis, the default rate is actually quite low, and therefore you can argue that you are actually not losing any return, in creating the social impact. I think that the more important question to ask is not so much that am I giving up something to invest the impact investment way, but rather the question asked that can I afford not to do it this way? Because it's a cartoon I showed last time, right? What is the sense of making a lot of money when there's no place for you to enjoy?
Yeah, I think I would also say that you want to make sure that the social enterprise is held to the same standard as any other business. It's just that the other businesses are not accounting for the negative impact that they're having, right? So I think that it's not a matter of we can accept a lower return, because if it isn't a sustainable business, it's not going to survive. So that's it has to. But what you have to do is you have to start holding the other companies accountable for the destruction that they are causing.
I guess the next question is for the social entrepreneurs. So when you were starting, like right now, Christina, and earlier on with the One Earth Designs, what kind of challenges do you guys have with starting the company? Like what kind of stage do you actually start to look for investors or impact investors? Because you started with Kickstarter, like the cross-funding.
No, actually, Scott and Catlin won a €500,000 grant. And that's what got the seed funding to actually start developing the idea and doing a lot of the work out in Western China. We closed the first round of impact investment funding a year and a half ago, and the Kickstarter was only a year ago. So it's been at each stage as we're looking to kind of grow and change and evolve. It's almost as if we're seeking different investment in order to achieve that goal.
I think I can speak to the very early stage of launching a startup. I think it's about not being obsessed with your solution, but being obsessed with the problem that you kind of try to set out to solve, because there are 100 million ways to solve the same problem. The challenge as an entrepreneur is to find the right product market fit that users and customers are willing to pay for the solution that can also solve the social problem. So one of the example of acumen investment is, for example, D-Light. They use solar as a power source for lanterns. And for a long time, they have trouble penetrating the market that they want to serve and sell. And they don't know why, because they thought, oh, won't it be wonderful if there will be light in the evening? And it turns out that light is important, but what's more important is mobile charging. So as soon as they install that mobile charging function into the D-Light lanterns, they fly off the shelf. So it's really about that sense of going to the customers and reiterating on what people are really willing to purchase and that they see a value in. And so I think in a nutshell it's about going out of the building and talking to as many people as possible and not being afraid of rejection.
What kind of people it takes to be a social entrepreneur?
There's a recent blog post that comes to mind. It was the intersection of should or must, right? And a social entrepreneur, it's a calling. It's something that you do 24 hours a day if you didn't need to sleep or eat. You know what I mean? It's the type of thing where you have to wake up in the morning and you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, because it is a hard, long road, and you need that type of stamina and that type of determination and that type of drive to not only inspire yourself to keep going, but also the people around you.
When we set out to do something, I think for myself, it's important for me to not act out of sympathy or pity. Because if we act out of sympathy and pity, we usually resort to the easiest way out, which is to hand out free services. And you get a pat on the back feeling and you move on. But you know that for social enterprise, what we're trying to do is to build a systematic, scalable, and self-sustaining solution. So to do that, sometimes it's tough love. If you act out of sympathy and pity, that energy runs dry very soon. Where is that overabundance flow of energy and love, right? That you don't derive your value from the work, but you kind of operates from another zone. So you don't derive the value out of the recognition that you get out of the work. A lot of times when we try to pursue businesses and work, a mean become an end. But we cannot have business or the work define us and have it perpetuate instead of solving a problem or a mission that you set out to solve.
The next question I want to ask me, what it takes to be an impact investor.
The point I was trying to make in the earlier presentation is to say the government, okay, at least the Hong Kong government, not all governments, Hong Kong government has lots of money to give away. Historically, it's just giving away money to support projects. Once the project uses up the money, it dies off, right? There's no continuity. It doesn't think about strategically is how do I crowd in more money using my initial seed money so that I can create a sustainable organization. So ultimately, that's what's needed, right? The change in mindset, right? For people to think about, like you said earlier, right? It's not just about giving money because I have this need to just solve a problem out of pity or whatever. I need to create a system. So impact investing is the same mindset, right? You approach it thinking that this is your contribution, right? But what is important is to build a series of investors that could help the company at different stages of growth. And one last point. Where we need the most money is at the very, very early stage, because that is the riskiest stage. Most startups fail. Probably 9 out of 10 will fail. Right? And just because you call yourself a social enterprise doesn't mean you won't fail. You're probably more likely to fail.
So when you're doing impact investing projects, so I know the financial returns are pretty easy to measure, but the social impacts are not always that easy to quantify and measure. Do you have a systematic way of measuring that?
I think in Acumen there is something that we do call the theory of change. So what it means is, let's say there is a business going on and it's about distributing solar lanterns, right? You can measure the impact by the number of customers that is using your solar lanterns. That is an outcome, it's not an impact, because that is not solving poverty. How is people using solar lanterns solving poverty? So the theory of change have usually multiple steps to it. It's the number of customers that is using your service or your product, and then the outcome should be, let's say, the education performance of the children, because they now can study throughout the nighttime. It will be the income level of these families, having lanterns they can do business in the evening time as well. The tailors, they can make more clothing in the evening time, etc., etc. So I think it's important for any startup to think through the theory of change. What are the steps that you're taking? And even though you can't prove a direct correlation, direct causation, there should be correlation that you can show. And I think partnering up with academia is important. And there are a lot of support that university and professors are very interested in terms of control and trial. So I do see a huge impact and opportunity in Hong Kong to do more of these partnerships with academia to really shed light on the several hundreds of social enterprises in Hong Kong and what is really the monetary or the education or any sorts of outcome impact. I think that will really grab people's attention and to create stronger momentum.
Maybe I can get a little bit of a specific example from our case. We actually do partner with Harvard University, and so the study that's actually part of Cap and Power is the co-founder's PhD thesis is around the impact of cleaner stoves in Western China. So, but those types of studies take a long, long time. So what we often do with our impact investors is we show more anecdotal evidence in the early stages. So we'll show videos of people using the product. We'll have quotes from our users. We'll have interviews. We'll have smaller scale things, because until, for example, our product scales, it's really hard to show numbers that are very compelling. But we do track the amount of dungs not collected. So what is the hours saved by those women? What is the savings in dollar amount because they're not purchasing coal? What is the reduction in the indoor air pollution as a result of them using this device instead of a traditional cooking stove?
You mentioned scale. So I think scalability is one of the very important factors that a lot of impact investors actually look at. Can you share with us a bit more about what do you think of the significance of scalability when you were actually starting?
So there are two types of businesses. There's a lifestyle business and there's a business that scales. So a lifestyle business is generally around to support the individual who started it, who would like it to kind of grow organically and move along, and that's fine. But you have to realize that the impact that you can have, while it's going to be really direct with those individuals that you service, if let's say you start a small orphanage in a developing country and you're really having an incredible impact on a few hundred people who come through, right? That's one type of scale, and that's fine. If you're looking to have the type of scale, for example, that one of Designs is striving, you're looking global, and that's kind of a whole other animal. So I think that for the type of energy and water issues that we're facing, something that's scalable is extremely important.
I would say I didn't get to go over the incubation. I mean, some of you were eagle eyes when I caught. I actually want to incubate companies and technology solution to a social issue. So a lot of people in the tech space, whether you're doing hardware or software, don't necessarily think of the application for the product in this particular way, right? So our incubator, in working with the Polanco and working with the design institute at PolyU, is intended to open the eyes and ears of some of the startup founders so that they can see applications for their products, right? And that ties in directly to scalability, right? I shouldn't be saying this because we are an iBakery, right? But because there are many restaurants similar to this in Hong Kong, right? That were started because they are decided by a non-profit. We want to create jobs for people who are hearing impaired, right? So there's a vegetarian restaurant in Wan Chai. Some of you have gone there, been there, right? Happy Veggies. You can go there, have a great meal. And most people there can't hear very well, right? Here, the number of the workers here have mental issues, or now or in the past, right? But are these models necessarily very scalable? I would say no, right? So these models are actually more applicable for philanthropy, right? So you have a charity, you raise funds to support something like this, right? But the social enterprises that are intended to attract investment capital has to be scalable. There's no other way.
As an impact investor, is there any exit strategy that's more common in this field? Is it similar to traditional venture capital, or there is a whole totally different story?
I think impact investing in its current form has really only been around for about 5 years, right? There have been some stories of exits, right? An exit could be a trade sale. IPO is probably not likely at this stage. It could be a trade sale or another round of investors coming in to buy you out, right? And if you want to be an impact investor, an exit is really important for you. I would suggest you go for the debt alternative. Don't do equity because it's not realistic at this stage to go in expecting I'm going to invest $5,000 or $10,000 and I expect to get money out, make 5 times my money in 3 years or whatever. That's just not going to happen. Right? It will take a lot longer.
I'm going to open questions, open the floor. If anybody has any questions.
I have a question specifically for One Earth Design. I'm wondering, since you're now selling to the for-profit for those people who are more well off, and at the same time you're also selling to those people who are in the development world who are actually needing the solution. I was wondering how are you going to market these two different market segments? So there are a couple different components to that. I think one component is, well, how do you price them differently, right? Especially in a country as diverse as China, where you actually have a commercial market at the same time that you have a developing market. So I think the answer is we're still figuring it out. We know that we are interested in doing a cost offsetting model because we know that the customers in the developed countries are actually further from us. So logistics costs, the cost for the retailers, the marketing dollars, all of that goes into the cost of the product. But we also want that to subsidize the work that we're doing in the developing world. But we're also bringing in CS partners and strategic philanthropy to cover the gap between those two. In markets where there coexists a developing and developed market, such as China, it's a question we still have yet to answer, to be honest.
Thank you. So my question is about the definition of social enterprise, and Ying just mentioned that there's an issue about this thing because frankly there's no worldwide definition of social enterprise, and one of the drawbacks of this is the abuse of social enterprise. Because this winter when I was in Beijing and I was talking with several social entrepreneurs there, and they are not willing to label themselves as social entrepreneurs because I think people there don't really think social enterprise is a good thing. Maybe it's abused there, and many people just use this label. So I'm wondering, did you notice this issue, and do you think there's a need for a worldwide definition of social enterprise? Thank you.
Do people think of Patagonia as a social enterprise? Right? I mean, they're a sustainable business that is just very conscientious about all the decisions they make and how it impacts the world, right? And that is a great example of what all companies should strive to be, whether they're social enterprise or not. So it's not about separating out here are the real the real or traditional companies, and here are the social enterprises. It's that all of them have to deal with these issues because these issues are so big and they're going to destroy us if we don't. And so I think that you can, I guess, spend a lot of time arguing over the finite points of what makes something a social enterprise, but at the end of the day, all businesses need to be sustainable, and all businesses have to give more to the world than they take away. Period.